Well, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Stefan for the invitation, and it's been a real privilege to be part of this. The couple of motivations for accepting the invitation, the fact being that to be in Stockholm, a beautiful city, only my second time here, so welcome to Stockholm, everyone. It's also that I really want to be part of the whole service design community and to share what we have done at Philips. We are pretty young with this part of the activity in terms of service design. So really, we would like to share some examples, some thoughts, and exchange, and really like to hear from you whether we are doing it well, could we improve it, and probably some exchanges at the end of it. Right. I'm a product industrial designer by training who has gone into service design, or at least as part of my portfolio. Well, I think like many of you, it's quite a natural sort of evolution. The other thing is that a few years ago, I had a conversation with my product design colleagues. It says that one day service designer is going to take over this world. So I said, well, let's be part of them if you can't beat them. So that's partly the reason as well. Okay. Well, we're supposed to provide a picture of a quality of life, and this is actually what I get every Monday and Sunday evening. It's actually my mom's cooking. So that is really during the moment where I feel I'm really privileged to have the quality of life. And the woman behind, I would say that she's the person that gave me the best quality in life. It's a rare picture. She never allows me to get into the kitchen. So she's going to be very angry if she finds out, so please don't tweet about this. Yeah. I just want to start off with, because in the conversation when we are shaping the material, myself and Stefan had a conversation and said it would be quite interesting to talk about how culture affects service design. I think within the next 30 minutes, it's very hard to go very in-depth into it, but I hope to provide you all with a rough idea of potentially what are the kind of factors and kind of ingredients that may affect the whole service design when we are approaching it. I would assume that most of you, if not all of you, have been to Asia, right? So I assume that, yes, everybody has been there. So thank you very much for contributing to the economy. But really, when you're there, it's only a few things that you think about. It's actually the food. One of the main thing. The street food is one of them. And actually, it dawns upon me that if you look at all these are actually food stores. And if you were to look at it quite carefully, I would like to draw your attention to a sign which is consistent on each of these stores. So they are organized in an area where you can buy food, right? Different types of food, and then after that, you pick it up. One of the things that appear quite consistently is this sign. It's called self-service, and I think it appears in other parts of the world as well. But when I think a bit deeper into it, actually it's an oxymoron, right? Actually, there's no service, but they say that, yeah, there's service, but you do it yourself, right? So it's a very nice way of just putting it something which is not there. I'm not sure. This is at least my perspective of taking, and maybe it's a cultural thing. I think something like that would be very interesting to discuss, because I do see this sign in other parts of the world, how it evolved. A bit of a background to this is that previously, all these stores have their own tables and chairs, meaning that they own it, right? The Singapore government decided to organize them into big centers they call hawker centers, which means that then all the tables and chairs can be shared. You can buy from one store and you can sit in any table, right? They started to, when it first started, the hawkers, they do serve. So you tell them the table number, you order a plate of chicken rice, for example, and then they'll bring it to you. But recently, over the past 5 to 6 years, there's this trend of not providing that service. I think it's actually basically due to economy. That the fact that, you know, if you have somebody to serve, you need another assistant in the store. So this whole self-service thing came about, and as a Singaporean seeing it, I sense a bit of the defensiveness about it, as a bit of a kind of a caveat, right? You know, hey, I'm not going to serve you. Yeah? If you want the food, you have to take it yourself. Cute. So it's becoming a bit of a culture now, right? Self-service, oxymoron. I really think it's like jumbo shrimps, you know. And it also prompted me to look at the word. The Chinese word for service, which is fu, right? I've seen some Asian friends around, and by no means this is only representing a certain chunk of Asia. But it's interesting because as I delve and I dive deeper into it, the character Fu actually, if you combine it with, it combine with other characters, it can form many different other meanings. So you can have things like administer, a uniform, to submit, to conform, right? Fu Wu, right? Or to a lot of those characters that you can form. But the sense that I got, and I'm not extremely strong in the Chinese language, but I think I have enough understanding to sort of give the sense that this word has a sense of supporting, yeah, of really providing in that sense. So it's very interesting. So it really prompts me to dive a bit deeper into the history of how this came about. And that is also the reason why, as was introduced, as I was speaking or talking to a friend, actually in the service industry, actually he provides F&B, and in this case it's actually in the hawker center. When he asked, what do you do? I said, service design. Very much like this morning, I had a hard time describing it because my friend said, what's there to design for service? You just do it, you just provide it, right? So it really gave me a hard time to really think through. And that's why I said that why is it that by putting a prefix, or rather a postfix of design at the back, suddenly makes it something so new, right? Actually, it's something that we've been doing it for a very long time. Just like to offer some perceptions and associations of what service means in Asia. And again, this is not based on hard, solid research, but real broad perceptions that we have picked up over the many years. And I think mainly this is brought about by the fact that the part of the world in Asia is predominated by the perception, or rather it's about hospitality, tourism, and leisure. This is really what service is associated with in that part of the world. And in fact, then Asians also do relate it in that perspective as well. And there along comes with a few other strings of associations or opinions. It's about, when you talk about service in Asia, immediately this few things comes to mind. It's about premium and luxury. That's one. The second is it's about paid privilege, meaning that it is something that you pay for. And then, linked to the last one, it is more of a transactional relationship because you pay for it, so you expect it. So there's a certain expectation in the relationship. The other thing about it is that it's always linked to pleasure and enjoyment. And like I said, I think probably it is due to the fact that that part of the world has built a reputation in those three areas of hospitality, tourism, and leisure. The essence of being served and to please is also there as well, right? It'd be very interesting to dig a bit deeper whether that is really within the culture. And I think you'll have your own stories of which is the best countries you've been to in Asia where the service is absolute top-notch, it's almost coming from the heart, and all those stories you can tell, I'm very sure. I think it's very interesting to aggregate it and then to have a good conversation about what is the perception of service, right, once you mention it in that part of the world. Yeah. Again, to remind, Asia is huge, right, from north to south, it stretches many different countries, many different cultures, so I'm not about to present a blanket picture, but at least the predominant opinion about it. Of course, you know that Philips were into healthcare, and that's really where most, if not all, our service design comes in. And that's why I want to spend some time using a couple of examples to have this discussion. Well, the fact is that being in healthcare, in the healthcare domain, is not always a happy business. It's actually, you're confronted with realities like this. These are very real pictures. I personally have experienced it. My mom actually had a fall 2 years ago, and 1 year before that had fell. So in fact, she fell 2 times, broke her left arm here, and I really can feel what is the trauma of somebody in your family, especially an elderly parent, having a fall and injuring themselves. Right? It's not so much of the fact that you fear for the well-being, but the whole emotional sort of burden and the trauma that you get as well. So this is what we aim to tackle in America. Right? In America, as much as 13 million elderlies fall every year. And that's only America alone. And that's only for the cases that's been recorded. Honestly, we do not have information about what is that statistics outside of America, right? I think all of us will grow old, right? And we will be facing that as well, and hopefully we will not be part of the statistics, but face it, it's a reality. And it all started with a project actually in product design to create a little gadget, right, for the elderly to wear, such that then when they fall, immediately there is a call between the elderly and the family members. It was a very simple device then. The notion, it was very product-centric about hardware. But eventually it started to evolve, right, into a much broader and much more comprehensive service that we provided. It was launched in February 2010. We have, over the years, evolved it, which means that then including the time that we started with the idea to develop, we are talking about a good 8 years now, for example, right? So it's actually a very long stretch of time to develop something which is robust, foolproof, and comprehensive. I'm going to play a video. It's about 6 minutes about this service that we are providing. There's a lot of details to it, but I think it's well worth giving some attention to it, because after that I will use it as the basis of the next part of the presentation. Yeah.
Meet Joyce. Joyce was recently widowed after her husband's long fight with heart failure. Now Joyce is feeling insecure while she's home alone, and while walking her dog in her suburban neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. Back in 2011, she had a hip replacement, which restored her mobility, but has made her understandably nervous about falls. Joyce still drives nearly every day to run errands and get to social events at her church and throughout the community. Daily, Joyce walks her dog, which keeps her active, but makes her nervous, especially in the winter, where she could slip on ice, fall, and no one would be there to see her. Joyce's daughter, Beth, lives in Chicago, Illinois. Beth finds herself constantly worrying about her mom. Beth really wants Joyce to come to Chicago to live with her. Beth can't imagine taking care of her mom from afar. Taking care of her father was rough enough on her family and her relationship. However, Joyce does not want to leave the home where she raised her kids, nor her network of friends. A friend told her about this Lifeline that works anywhere. Joyce gave Lifeline a call and ordered a new subscription to the new Lifeline Anywhere service. This new service allows her to get help, not just inside the home, but everywhere. Joyce signed up and scheduled an appointment to have an installer come out to install and show her how to use the Lifeline. Shortly after signing up, Joyce gets an email prepping her for what will be asked in her care plan creation phone call that she will get in a few days. Also in this email, if she chooses, she can fill out the same care plan online or choose to have a loved one fill it out on her behalf. 2 days later, Joyce gets a call from Lifeline. Lifeline asks her about who she would like to help her in case of an emergency and who she would like to be notified if an incident occurs. Because of the email she received, she was ready to answer these questions. Joyce selects her neighbor Tom and his wife Claudia, along with her best friend Linda, to respond to her in case there is an emergency. She adds her son John and their daughter Beth to be notified if there is an incident. Joyce provides the contact information for her care team, including email addresses if she has them available. Joyce also allows her daughter Beth and her son John to update medical and emergency information on her behalf, along with her primary care physician, Dr. Abraham. After the care plan creation is complete, all of the notifiers and responders get an email or a text message, depending on the information available. This email explains what it means to be a notifier or a responder, so that there are no surprises in the first incident. The email also asks the notifiers and responders to make sure that the information on file from Joyce is the best way to get a hold of them. Beth would prefer that her cell phone versus her home phone is used in the case of an emergency. So she logs on to the caregiver portal and updates the information accordingly. The email also invites them to install the Lifeline app, which allows notifiers and responders to better help their loved ones in the case of an emergency. The app explains what will happen in the case of an emergency as it takes the notifier or responder through the setup process.
When you hear this ring, Philip's life.
Having this app doesn't just help caregivers understand their role, but it helps in the event of an incident. If an incident occurs and Joyce needs help, Lifeline can ping the app to find which responder is the closest to Joyce's location, and therefore get her better help quicker. A month into service, Joyce has been having issues remembering to wear her Lifeline inside the home. She takes it off when she goes to bed and while taking showers, and often forgets to put it back on. She wasn't really aware of how little she was wearing the Lifeline. A month into her service, Joyce gets a letter from Lifeline informing her that she has been unprotected for 202 hours, or a total of 8.4 days, because she has not been wearing her button. This reminds Joyce of a really close call that she had last week when she almost fell while showering and her button was out of reach. This one piece of information is changing Joyce's behavior to wear her button and allow her to be better assisted in the event of an emergency. In addition to the information about button wear is an attached copy of Joyce's care plan, so if any errors or medical changes arise, she can be reminded to update her care plan. If Joyce has previously read and acted upon a Lifeline email communication, she will receive an email instead of a letter, informing her of both her button wear and her care plan. Beth, Joyce's daughter, and one of her notifiers, also gets a semi-monthly email determined by her previous contact with Lifeline touchpoints. The communication includes both Joyce's wear of the button and a care plan completion score. Because Joyce has Lifeline Anywhere, it is more critical than ever that Lifeline has as much information about Joyce as possible. In the case of emergency, EMS and other services will need to be able to identify her outside of the home. The Lifeline caregiver can log in to update this information directly from the email correspondence. In this portal, as more information is added to Joyce's care plan, her readiness score goes up, eventually reaching 100% only when the profile has been completely filled out. Later email correspondence provide caregiving tips and profile update reminders for Beth to make sure that Joyce's care plan is up to date. These new touchpoints help keep everyone more informed and ready in case there is an emergency, allowing Joyce to get better help in the moment, and Beth, other members of Joyce's care team, and emergency services to be better informed in the moment of crisis.
Well, so you can see actually it's an extremely comprehensive service that we've provided. And it's been layered upon over many, many years. So it's not that this was conceived right from the beginning. It's impossible to do that. I think the discussion about linking systems is exactly what we did. So the link to the emergency services, the link to the caregivers as well. So, and of course, talking to the insurers really require a lot of negotiation, a lot of understanding of stakeholders. So cumulatively, we've come to this point where I think we are providing quite a robust system. After all, you're talking about the life and death of individuals. Following next few slides is that I just want to share some notes that we as a design team has taken, because the complexity of a service like this, where you're dealing in those very serious issues, and as well as emotional ones, compels us to adopt tools and approaches to be as simple as possible, because that's the only way to make sense of it. Just a few. The first one is that what we call nodes, and these are really the points where the services within the service chain, the interface and the handover parts of it, and we realize these are the points which are usually the weakest. It's interesting because that goes for a product as well, you know, where the parts comes together is usually the weakest one. Same thing for service. So we give extra attention to those areas. Small pivots, a word that we use that what seemingly are trivial items to us as designers when we are creating it actually could be a big deal to the receiver of the service. Just like with that letter that Joyce got, initially it was just a thought to say, okay, I think we should inform how many missed hours, but we saw that actually that changed the whole behavior of the elderly adopting that particular the device. So small pivots, right now we are very sensitive to it. We don't make assumptions. We really talk to the people to understand those small pivots that could make or break a service flow. Recovery, I think for those of us in the service sector, providing service as in, I think this is actually a very common word, but we have adopted it for service design because very seldom do we talk about recovery. We always assume that the service will go smoothly, right? But what happens if it goes wrong? What is the recovery that we need to do? The steps that immediately brings the service back on track again. So that is another big area that we constantly look into. Finally, constant calibration. I think we've been talking about this a lot, but this we do very, very consistently with all the stakeholders to have that continuous check and tweak. So it's about really sort of the small little calibrations that you make consistently and regularly that would help to incrementally evolve the whole service. So a few things which that keeps sort of the design team on our toes. And the other thing, quite interestingly, is that we also came to categorize within a service 2 types of services. Right? One is actually what we call a scripted service. It is very much process-oriented. It is a service that you delegate to the people mapping out the service. And here we are dealing with very clearly defined steps, right, where it's very procedural and towards a very specific outcome. Graphically, you can represent it like this, where each of those steps there, right, follow very closely one after another. So almost in a gated way that if you don't do this, you don't go on to the next one. Very scripted. And I think I can all think of a lot of services that falls within this classification, especially those which are dealing in situations of safety, right? And also very highly technical. So we found that in the Lifeline, there is a large part of it which needs to conform to a scripted service where you put down very detailedly. At the same time, we also realize that there is a part which we call, what we call right now, a spontaneous service. Value-based. So it's very much empowered, right? And value as in that you define a few key attributes that you want the team to achieve, and then you allow a much more agile and initiated approach. So with broader guidance, but still achieving a desired outcome. Graphically, you can see it like this, right? Meaning that you still head towards a final outcome, but you plant broader points to guide. Very interestingly, this is an example in the part that when the elderly call up the call center, after right now a few years of having this system installed, we realized that the elderly are actually calling up the call center to have a chat because they're often very lonely, right? Talking about the cats and the family man. So, well, some of the call centers operators they were quite spontaneous about it because after all, it is about making sure that the elderly is in good health, but also in well-being as well. So they actually entertain that discussion over the call, right? And right now it becomes very much a point where the elderly looks forward to. So this wasn't scripted at all, definitely not in the service that we provided. But when we picked this up, we allow this to happen. Yeah. So the ideal situation, it's really a combination of this where we have to sort of pragmatically look at the balance of which is the part of the service that we have to follow very, very strict adherence to the steps that we put in place, and in certain parts of the service where we said, okay, we allow a bit more free play as long as you achieve the desired outcome. Yeah. Of course, getting into the service part of it as well, you also made it more obvious to us as a design team, but also as a company, that because if you know that our company is initially started with a very hardware-based history, and to make the shift into a service base is actually not easy at all. Not going to go through everything, but just to call out a few things, because this really gives us a lot more clue right now. How do we need to rejig ourselves as a company? Not only in terms of the process, the resource, the enabling conditions, but also the mind as well, including myself, to be honest. It took me quite a while to shift from, for example, in a very cyclical approach in hardware. For those of us familiar in designing products or creating products, it's always coming in a cycle, right? You make the product, you debug it, you put it on the shelf, and, well, for a moment, your job is done, and then you see what happens. But in service-based, it actually happens when you deliver. So it's a very different ballgame altogether, also including the colleagues in finance and accounting, right? How do they look at the business model? Things like being predictive to responsive, because actually when you're building a product, you're trying to predict, hopefully with all the right information, that you have created the best product that your target audience wants. So it's a bit predictive in that sense, right? But for service, you get that response immediately. So a few things which allow us as a team to really put side by side where we are from to go to where we want to, right? That is not to say that we have abandoned the hardware part, because I've also realized that being a product designer, if I know the service part better, I can actually deliver a stronger hardware to be part of the whole experience. So I think it's really very much complementary in the sense that I think I picked up a point about the multiple touch points of the media that plays out the whole service. This is Singapore, and I think you can figure out what a digit means, what a number means, sorry, in relation to the picture. Yes, by 2030, 18.7% of the Singapore population will be over 65. I think I'm contributing to that figure, actually. And this is not dissimilar to a lot of cities in Asia. So we are only reaching that state faster than other countries. So we have to solve the problem, right? So we're confronted a problem, we have to solve it. And one of the things that the Singapore government aims to do, I hope I'm not sounding as if I'm trying to preach, trying to promote the government, but this is what they aim to do. They want to provide health care for the entire population until the point where they don't need it anymore, i.e. from cradle to grave, right? And it is a big move, it is a big ambition, right? It's a big ambition because of the fact that we have such a population to contend with. So they started a health screening for neighborhoods. It is a very simple program. What the government wants to do is that they want to understand what is the state of affairs in terms of health when it comes to this part of the population. So we were involved in one of the projects in with a hospital to do the health screening. And this is actually done at the bottom of government subsidized flats. So for those of you who have been to Singapore, quite typically about 75% of the population stay in such dwellings. The ground floor are all empty. It's just the pillars that support, and then it's used for various social activities for the neighborhood. And one of these activities is to do a health screening. So actually it's for free, but in order to entice, to give the sense of ownership, all the elderlies above the age of 65 would pay about $2 Singapore. So that is about €1.20 for the service. So the idea is to coax them down, all the elderlies from the block, and to do a health screening. And what we did was to shadow this whole process, right? And this is held in conjunction with the Ministry of Health and also with a hospital. In this case, the hospital name is Alexandra Hospital. And we mapped through that whole service that they provided in the health screening. The idea is just to get a snapshot of what is the quality of health in that particular estate. So they're doing this estate by estate, and they have invited us to partner them to see how they can improve that service. And as you can see, this is only the beginning part of a greater program. Right. What is interesting is that, well, we went through the whole process approach. And whilst talking to them, and shadowing, is that we picked up certain opinions and impressions of what healthcare service should be from the elderly and from those 65 and above Of course, from them, they said it has to be affordable and accessible, meaning that they can easily reach it. It should be connected. They should be connected, but independent, meaning that they still want to be connected with the community and with their family and friends, but they want to be independent, right? And they do not mind so much of an assistance, but they want to do it by themselves as well. So it's a bit of a self-support resistance. And concern is a big one, meaning that they want to be concerned, right? It's more of the emotional part that they're looking for, and with minimal disturbances and burden to others. It's interesting, we have not really sort of mapped this against the different culture, and whether, let's say, the religious element comes into play as well, as it affects the whole state of mind. What we also uncovered are the unsaid things. That from that exercise, not everybody turned up, only about 65% of the elderly turned up, right? Some of them were simply uninformed. Many of them fear. They do not know what this health screening is about. And they also fear what happens if they find out if there's something wrong with the health, right? Will they be able to afford to do the treatment? A large part talks about fate, meaning that, well, if I have to go, I'll go. So they really leave it to the extent. Cultural norms, societal stigma also has a lot to play into the minds as well. I'll just run through this quite quickly. And then what we did was, actually we did a lot of mapping, and in fact this is still work in progress, is that we map all the emotions, that if we were going to give them an activity that they're familiar with versus an activity that they're not familiar with, or topic, and map it against self-help and full service. One example that we talked to them is about taking their medication, right? If they're familiar with the medication that they take, all right, they're very confident if they do it by themselves. They usually have that sense of confidence. But as soon as you start to change the medication, right, they completely go into this bubble of fear. Of course, there are many other emotions which surrounds this, but predominantly we're able to sort of conclude those broad 4 areas. In certain situations where they have a domestic helper to help and take care of them, and usually that's the case a lot in Singapore, to take care of the elderly, where the domestic helper help to, let's say, administer the medication, right? It ranges from assured, if they know what they're taking, to anxious. Well, meaning that they still trust the person administering the medication, but there is a sense of anxiousness about it. Like I said, this is work in progress. We are using this as a model to give us a sense of what are the emotions. And really, this is what we told ourselves after going through a couple of those exercises, that in order to really do good healthcare service design, we have to crack this part first, understanding the motivation and the emotion aspect of it. Running through the last part quite quickly because I'm getting a signal there. This is the current relationship in healthcare, doctor or professional and self. And if we were to just schematically look at the range of activities that needs to be done, the current picture looks something like this. Just a rough impression, there's a lot, it's burdening the professional, right, in terms of prevention, examination, the diagnostics part of it, treatment, of course, maintenance, right? But actually, a lot can be done, and in fact, right now the ambition is to shift a lot more to the self, right? And the future of healthcare has to go this way, right? The burden is too much on the professionals to take care of the single individual. So the individual really have to take up part of the responsibility, and we're going to do this through technology and, of course, with the services that we're going to create. Last part, this is a real situation. This is 1931 in the Forbidden City, and probably this is the first example of healthcare service. Where in this case, I think the doctor had to go to the Forbidden City because this little boy or girl, I don't know, can't travel out of the Forbidden City. And the machine there is actually a X-ray device from Philips that was created, and it was brought to that situation. So Very interestingly, already that time, and this was definitely due to a cultural situation that that immobilized the child, literally can't get out of the room, that needs the doctor to come. But what we are creating today is also a service, and we are formulating it as we speak. It's called Hospital to Home. Really, the whole ambition is to see how can we move the whole healthcare service, right, to extend from hospital to home. And those are just a few sort of generic steps from examination end to end to maintenance. Obviously, they are not in equal effort, they are not in equal resource in that sense. It roughly looks like this, right? Especially in the recovery part of it. Of course, the first thing we're going to tackle is that, can recovery be done at home? Right? That first question, I'm sure, will require a rewiring of us as users of healthcare, but also to doctors as well. Right? But the fact is, there's a lot of recovery can be done at home. Yeah? If it's well constructed, if it's well put together, and if it's put together in a way that allows that patient to do it. And these are just some of the activities that will have to be enabled to make that happen. Probably need a home monitoring hardware. You need to collect the data information to communicate with the doctor. You need to work together with a care system, and here in terms of shifting the patient from hospital to the home. You need technical assistance because you need some form of that knowledge when you have machines back in the domestic environment that does the monitoring. You need to keep in contact with the hospital because that dialogue has to go on to see how the patient is doing. The medical guidance, as in the expert, must be ready there to sort of give that advice on a regular basis. And of course, family support as well to accommodate the fact that the recovery is being done at home. So a lot of things to put in place, but it's not impossible. We are working towards that. And only just to address this part of it, the potential to shift a lot more of their activities really can happen. I just want to leave you with two thoughts and probably also two directions that are also guiding us as a design team and also as a company as well. Is that the first thing is that we have seen wearables coming, the quantified self, the continuum of health. We are at the dawn of what I call consumer healthcare. Right? It's similar to consumer electronics, consumer lifestyle, for example, but consumer healthcare, meaning that healthcare services that you and I can consume right now, here. All right? We are only at the dawn of it. We really do not know how it's going to change the landscape, but we have to be prepared for it, and I think it's going to offer a lot of potential, a lot of disruption as well. The second thing is that I think we have to rethink. We have to rethink and shift the relationship between being taken care of to us taking care of ourselves. So that is really what has been guiding us as we go forward. With that, I thank you.